you help people a lot with real estate, don't you?
Yeah, I've been doing that from the day I started. I was hired by a firm when I got out of Loyola at the executive relocation. And my first day, they handed me 4 files, and they said, "See you tomorrow." And I go, "What do you mean?" They go, "You need a Tribune map. There's a 7-Eleven next door. Get your Tribune map." There's no GPS. This is 1986, right? And we have told all the other attorneys on all 4 to take care of you. So I go, "That's okay." So I go in, have a cup of coffee. They come right around. They say, "Mr. and Mrs. Jones, this is Dave. He's a brand new attorney hire of a friend of ours. Would you mind if I share some information with him as he does his part?" Oh, we all like people to learn. Then I went the next day, 4 other attorneys. Eventually, I started realizing that I was catching on, and I started to have more time to network with the realtors and the lenders. And before you know it, I was a partner and paying for myself. Well, many associates do not pay for themselves, meaning that your revenue that
Bringing
you bring
them
in. Yeah, it happened within about 2 years. I was
Really?
cash positive. Yeah, and eventually made partner. And the reason is, like I said, but having that experience with that relo firm, they had high-end questions. I mean, these are substantially expensive properties. Back in the day when you were an executive, they would buy your house without a buyer. We would have a closing to calculate your equity. You're moving to St. Louis, right? They would calculate your equity, cut you a check, and set you loose to go find a home with one of their agents. They had a network of agents, but you didn't have to worry about selling your house. They would start taking over the payments, the taxes, and eventually they'd mark it up and sell it. Sometimes they lost money, but it was part of the benefit. And whatever they were short, that was billed to the employer. The employer paid for everything. I had one lady, actually nearby Arlington Heights, whose husband was the person, we called them transferees. They were going to like Kansas from Chicago, and her kids were in the district, 214, like very nice school district.
I went to 214.
Well, I
went
could
to
tell.
Hershey High School.
I could tell. So she calls me on a Friday.
That's very nice of you, Dave.
She calls me on a Friday afternoon and says, "David, are you my lawyer too?" Meaning, can I talk candidly? I said, "Well, yeah, actually, ultimately, I'm being paid by your husband's employer, but fire away." She goes, "Okay, is this confidential?" I go, "Don't worry about it. Tell me what's up." "Under no circumstances are you to let this deal close. I don't care how you do it. I don't care if you burn letters. I don't care if you swear at the other attorney. Make this explode. I am not moving to Kansas." So what I had to do was I said, "Okay, well, have a good day." I didn't answer any of that. Took it in the file, taped it closed, and shipped it to their office. They were in a Northwest Suburb. And I said, "I have an ethical conflict now. I can't handle either. I can't handle this."
That's true.
Yeah, I just shut up. I didn't ever tell him the backstory. But that poor guy, if it got out later why I gave up the file, here's what it would be. It'd be like an Office Space with the Bobs. They'd come in and say, "So you're the Bobs, we're in charge of relocation. You're not going to be here anymore. You got to control your family or whatever. You're done.
Yeah.
You caused this major embarrassment, whatever." Yeah. So, and those buyers, there was a buyer under contract. Someone was to buy that house.
So let me ask you this now.
Yes.
That's what I've been asking.
That's a good story, though.
That is a good story. And I also wanted to, I've been asking attorneys, like, what's the first job you had out of law school?
Mm-hmm.
Also, why you went to law school.
Mm-hmm.
So why did you go to law school?
I was a law clerk before I even thought of being a lawyer. I was an employed law clerk at a River North law firm. They saw that I had a knack for it, and they said, "Would you mind staying I'd already been there 3 years as an employee. And they said, "Would you mind staying 3 more years? You can apply to whatever school you want. We'll help you some financial, not the tuition, but they just gave me a raise and things to help get me through." And I said, "Well, yeah, of course, if I can get in." They go, "You'll do fine." So I took the LSAT, did pretty well. And then I got into DePaul, Kent, and Loyola, and John Marshall. Picked Loyola because it was closer to their office in River North. I would walk to class from there. It was walk-worthy because they were at State and Pearson, and this was up at Grand and Wells. And I stayed the full 3 years, passed the bar, and then they let me stay there and making good money for the time until I actually found where I wanted to practice. They offered me a job, by the way.
Did they do real estate?
They did real estate. They did a lot of business law. They did a lot of court work. I cut my teeth on many areas, but the issue was that I saw kind of a glass ceiling there. I didn't really. One very dear friend of mine who's now passed away told me, he was a patent attorney. I knew him from my church. And he goes, "You really don't want to stay at the place where you were the guy who picked up their cleaning once in a while or took their car to the dealer. You'll never be thought of, even though hard you work and you'll make the money, you'll always in the back of their mind, when they shut their doors, they'll say, 'Well, David's not going to leave,' or whatever." So I'm still friends with them, but they just said, that's dangerous ground. Don't set yourself up. If you're good at it, you will land somewhere. And I stayed there till December of '86. They took care of me. They kept paying me the same amount. And then I had a dinner with them, and I went out to Elk Grove Village, this very town. My first job, I replaced Rod Bogoyevich at a law firm. He left the practice of law to go into politics, and the firm that I got hired by, he was an associate, and I actually sat at his desk.
Really?
And we actually kept in touch when he was in Congress, and then, of course, some things changed in his world. But, yeah, he was doing that running around closing job that I took.
Oh, and I always ask people that question because it's interesting how many attorneys wind up doing whatever they do right out of law school. That's right, because that's kind of what you learn and that's what you do.
And if you're not good at it, then it doesn't last.
Let me ask you this. I got about 3.5 minutes left, and I want to ask you this, and this is why. I have 2 sons, and both of my sons are now in law school.
Right.
And so I want to ask you, what kind of advice would you have for law students or new lawyers coming out of law school now? What kind of advice would you have for them?
One is social and one is academic. The social is make as many friends as you can, because you have so much in common with them that when you start out your first 5 years, you've got to have a network of people that you can pick up the phone and say, I can't take it anymore, whatever the pressure, or just to continue to have a life, because it's very hard when you're a new attorney. Make a lot of friends, and I made a point to do that. I still keep in touch with some of the greatest guys ever. I mentioned earlier, one of my friends is a magistrate, 2 of them are circuit court judges, but not being a litigator, it doesn't affect my world that much, but I can pick up the phone with any of them still. The second thing is academic. You should pick the classes. First year is all the same. You should pick a variety of classes, even if they're heard to be a hard class, because it just could be that one of the classes that you take will catch such interest by you, even though you're studying so hard, that your whole life could be altered. My teacher for products liability, for example, he represented large manufacturers. They had one where they had a guy actually have a lawnmower sideways to cool his garage, and he's got it running. Well, it's going to go, the blade, right, or whatever. So then he would represent the lawnmower company on the injury or whatever. I love that class so much, but the issue was I saw how tired he was. He was trying cases during the day, getting paid well because he was the defense lawyer, but I just saw that he really had a very hard life. He got paid well, but I said, you know what? It's fascinating. I love the stories, because it was so great to have a lawyer who was out in the trenches as your professor. So I could have gone that way, but I looked at it, I said, he's really tired, man. He's hardly getting the class done. But then, sure enough, I did take a real estate class, and I did ask very intelligent questions. And so when I started looking, I really did want to start. It's also a less adversarial. I'm not a wimp. I can say my terms and talk on my feet like a trial lawyer. Okay, I can do that. But the issue is the non-adversarial, being a Christian, actually, that leaned me towards that of reconciliation, all working together, not having to make it personal. And there is not a lot of that in real estate. In real estate, everybody's working together. You still represent your client's interests. But that was more in tune with who I am as a person, of being in a non-adversarial. Probate itself can be kind of adversarial if some family members think somebody's taken too much or whatever. But even some of that, I've had to step out and bring in some bring in a second wingman who's maybe a little savvy, or wingwoman when it gets heated up. But again, I'm not scared of conflict, but when you're going to live your life, that one fit my value system of basically the least adversarial type of the law that I could see. Other than just reading books all day and writing briefs, that wasn't me either.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm putting these together for both my sons. They listen to these for the advice, so I appreciate that. Tell us where people can